Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, I'm looking at some Dynasty stashes. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's go. So, first player, Trey Benson. Now, obviously, Benson is a much higher level of stash than players I usually discuss, but he's kind of been in the news a little bit lately because head coach Jonathan Gannon did talk positively about him recently, despite Benson's rough 2024 rookie year. So, in 2024, in 13 games, Benson had 63 carries, 291 yards, a touchdown, and 6 carries, set catches for 59 yards. He barely played. We saw way too much of Amari DeMercado and Michael Carter, but Benson wasn't horrible on the carries he did see. Now, why do I have Benson as a dynasty stash? Well, he turns 23 years old in July. Still a young player. Plenty of time for him to turn his career around. It's not over or anything. He was the 66th overall pick last year, early third-round pick, had 2 solid years at Florida State, was never a workhorse, and I don't expect him to be a workhorse in the NFL, but he played both years with a knack for scoring touchdowns. Now, we know that the Cardinals extended James Conner's contract last year, but the guarantees are done after 2025. So he has no guaranteed money for 2026. The Cardinals could save $8 million by cutting him at that point when he would be 31 years old. It's entirely possible that this season is kind of a transition year. Benson becomes the starter before the end of the year and is the clear starter in 2026. And again, unlike some of the other backups, I feel like Benson's backup job is pretty secure. I don't expect him to be replaced by someone else this off season. Next up is Jalen Coker. So I've talked about him before, but things have changed more in his favor since the last time I discussed him. So we'll go through his 2024 pretty quickly. In 11 games, 32 catches, 478 yards, 2 touchdowns, 46 targets, 2.9 catches, and 43.5 yards a game. He did more than Xavier Legette, and he flashed good skills in 2024. He averaged 3.6 catches and 51.2 yards a game over the final 5 games, and his role changed over that period. He started playing a full snap share of 80% of snaps or more. Again, he was a starter over that period of time. Now, there's been some changes in the Panthers' plans, I've heard. So, number one, Xavier Legette underwent a foot procedure in addition to rehabbing the wrist injury. So we knew about the wrist injury. That was a problem all year. Now a foot injury, another problem. We don't want to hear about that, right? We don't like a problem. It sounds very negative to me. And foot injuries, of all the injuries, we know that foot injuries linger for wide receivers. They don't go away. They linger. I don't care that the Panthers say, well, it'll be okay. We don't know that. I mean, Xavier Legette was bad anyway, let alone with another problem. So I don't like that. So it's not looking good for Xavier Legette. And then a lot of the possible additions for wide receiver for the Panthers have dried up. T. Higgins, they're going to put the franchise tag on him, and it might mean most likely that he's going to stay with the Bengals. I see fewer and fewer mocks with the Panthers selecting Ted McMillan at 8. I see Ted McMillan falling past that more often than going at 8. Chris Godwin seems likely to return to the Bucs, at least at this moment. So while I do think the Panthers will make an addition, they're not just going to go in with Coker, Legette, and Thielen. I do think that Coker's chance to be a starter or compete for a starting week 1 role have vastly increased versus a month ago. So that's why I'm mentioning Jalen Coker again right now. Next up, Darius Slayton. Well, Slayton's not super exciting. I mean, we know he's an impending free agent. We know that the free agent class is a bit weak. And Slayton is somehow one of the better free agent wide receivers, which is wild to me. But I guess teams just don't let good wide receivers hit free agency. So in 16 games, he had 39 catches, 573 yards, 2 touchdowns, 71 targets, 2.4 catches, and 35.8 yards a game. But he was far more productive when Malik Nabers was out. He had 2 games with more than 7 targets. Those were the 2 that Nabers missed. So he did show that he had more upside potentially. Now, really, this is a value stash. So we covered 2 higher level stashes. Trey Benson, Jalen Coker. Okay, maybe those are players where I do see that I could believe in them someday. Most stashes are not players that I actually believe in. Dynasty is first and foremost a value game. Stashes are players that could gain value in the near future. Darius Slayton is on that list. If he lands in a good free agent spot, he could gain value. My recommendation, if that happens, would be to sell him, not hold him. But again, when I say stash, I'm usually referring to stash to gain value. Darius Slayton fits well in that category. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. Right now, I'm offering a 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. You can get my rankings, including rookie ranks, access to the Discord, all of my write-ups, direct message fantasy advice, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos, which you'll see at the end of this video. Tiers begin at just $5 a month, $250 with the discount, and they include those things on a sliding scale. Now, if you want to know more about the Patreon, check out my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel. It's a great place to interact with me, get the rankings, and we will, well, not we, I mean, I will help you with your fantasy teams on a daily basis. I'm active in there every single day. That's not the case on YouTube or Twitter. So if you want to interact with me every day, the only way to do that is to join the Patreon. With that said, let's jump into my next player. So next up, Daniel Jones, a free agent this offseason, who I haven't heard too much buzz about a landing spot, but we know has some value when he's playing. In 2024, in 10 games, 63.3% completion, 8 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 6.1 yards per attempt, and 67 carries, 265 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He averaged 26.5 rushing yards a game, which is valuable, but not the highs of 2022. He averaged 13.5 fantasy points per game, which was 26th among quarterbacks. It's not great, but it is more than CJ Stroud, for example. So there were quarterbacks who were worse than Daniel Jones. Now, again, why do I have him as a dynasty stash? Well, there is rushing upside and some free agency value. He's averaged at least 25 rushing yards a game every year since 2020, which gives him fantasy value, especially in 4-point passing touchdown formats. And Jones could sign in a bridge quarterback role. There are a few teams out there where Jones could start a few games. The Steelers are the most common that I've heard mentioned here and there. Maybe the Vikings, if he signs there and then JJ McCarthy isn't ready for week 1, that's a possibility. Again, though, I'm not saying that I believe in Jones. I'm not saying that I'm excited by Jones as a player. I'm not. But it's about value. If Jones goes somewhere where there is a possibility of starting some games, Jones might have some dynasty value. And we know on a week-to-week basis, he can carry some fantasy value. Now, my final player, Jordan Whittington. So Whittington is a bizarre player because he was one of my favorite stash candidates throughout the 2024 offseason and a rookie sleeper who I talked about a lot. And then he did well before vanishing. So he played 15 games. He had 22 catches, 293 yards on 28 targets. Raw numbers are relevant, though, because all of this production was in a short stretch. In basically 2 weeks, he had 13 catches, 151 yards, and 18 targets through weeks 4 and 5. All of his production in those 2 games, essentially. Then he got hurt, and then he never came back as Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp returned to the lineup. Outside of week 18, where the Rams benched their starters, Whittington totaled 2 catches for 18 yards the rest of the way, and that includes the playoffs. So essentially, he was irrelevant. Now, why is Jordan Whittington a dynasty stash? There is like an obsession with Jordan Whittington. I don't understand it. The Cooper Kupp trade, the Rams, other wide receivers being free agents. There's a lot going on. Kupp is going to be traded. The Rams have announced this. And some think that Whittington will replace Kupp. I think Whittington's showing of 2 catches over the last 14 games show that he's not going to replace Kupp. But some people think that. So they think that. Then we have Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson. They're unrestricted free agents. Okay, that's interesting. Not sure that means that Whittington is going to break out because we know that players leaving doesn't make bad players break out. Now, as I said, Whittington did nothing, 0, down the stretch to show he was gaining the trust of the coaching staff, even as Kupp faded into oblivion. So if I have nothing nice to say about Whittington, and I really don't, Why are we talking about him? Great question. It's because his value is already going up. People are talking about him as someone who's going to be starter next year. I don't see that. I don't see that at all. But they're talking about it. So if they're talking about it, that means that his value is rising. And that would mean that, if you could get this player now before Kupp is actually traded, maybe it's a little late for this segment, but before Kupp is traded, and then you can sell him after Kupp is traded, that could be interesting. It's just something to consider. Regardless, again, stash candidates are for their potential to gain value, especially in the offseason when games are not being played. There's been a lot of NFL rumors lately, but there's two pieces of actual news that are not rumors. The first, Khalil Shakir signs contract extension with the Bills. 4 years, up to $60.2 million deal with $32 million guaranteed. It's a bargain. Shakir remains on his rookie deal with just a 3.4 million overall number for the 2025. So they can spread these cap hits over the 5 years of the total contract as he signed through 2029, where he will still just be 29 years old. The Bills probably are only committed to Shakir through 2027 at most, given that there's only 32 million guaranteed split over these first 3 years, maybe not even. So 2028 and 2029 have zero guarantees. But this is a really, really smart piece of business from the Bills because we know any sort of receiver starter on the open free agency market costs at a minimum 15, 16 million for a low-end starter. And you're getting that for someone you already know you like. Right now, Shakir is the current top receiver on the Bills, but is vulnerable to an outside addition. So what does this mean? Well, what it means to me is that no one on the Bills currently will pass Shakir in the pecking order. That's Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, and would also include Amari Cooper coming back. We saw what that looked like. I don't think Amari Cooper is coming back. But if he did, he would also be behind Shakir. The Bills' offense is strange to me, though. Something's not right here because Shakir is mostly a slot wide receiver. He plays in the slot majority of the time. And Dalton Kincaid is a tweener tight end who really plays in two tight end sets. So they can't both be out there at the same time. Clearly, the Bills love Shakir because they gave him all this money. So I don't know what they're thinking with Kincaid, who I think is the big loser from this announcement. Not that I believed in Kincaid anyway. Now, next piece of news. Travis Kelce will play in 2025. That was announced on the Pat McAfee show. Kelce's officially back. And now is the time to move on. I'm not interested in him. We heard that Kelce knew that his role would be limited in 2025 if he did come back. I think at best, he's the third option behind Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. I mean, that's what was going to happen this year before Rashee Rice went down. I do think we see more of Noah Gray. I think we see Travis Kelce more in a receiving only role. I think we see more of Noah Gray in that traditional tight end role. I think we see less of Travis Kelce. I think we see more of a 60 to 70% snap share at most. I don't think Travis Kelce is going to be he's certainly not going to be in my top 5 for redraft. He'll probably be somewhere around tight end 10, but I'm just not interested. That's not going to be a player that helps you. So if you can get anything for Travis Kelce that's decent, I would move on now that he's in the news. Usually is a good time to move on. Now, we've got a couple of Patreon questions, so we'll jump into those and then close out the show. I think the NFL is better off not to see Aaron Rodgers play in 2025. I mean, I don't know. Aaron Rodgers, he was not abysmal. He was not a top 20 real life quarterback. You could argue, is he between 20 and 25, 25 and 30, but he was not top 20. So if he's not top 20, that means he's a bottom third starter. And that was in age 40 going on 41. Is it really going to be better in age 41 going on 42? I just think, what is the upside there? What is the upside? I mean, if you can get Aaron Rodgers at the minimum, okay, maybe that could give you an okay team, but I just don't see it. I really think it's time to move on from Rodgers. I am nervous that he's going to end up on the Rams, but regardless, I'm not going to be high on Aaron Rodgers. He looked pretty bad, and if someone looks not great at 40, 41, why would I want them at 41 going on 42? How are you feeling about Rome Odunze outlook with the changes to the Bears coaching staff? I mean, it can't be worse, right? There's no getting worse. Ben Johnson is a smart guy. We know that. We know that Ben Johnson is a smart guy. I think he's going to see that he has different weapons than he had in Detroit, right? Cole Kmet is not Sam Laporta. He's not. He's not as good. Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and Jameson Williams are different from DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. DJ Moore and Rome Odunze are more, not that they're similar, but they're not as wildly different as Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and Jameson Williams. So I don't think we're going to see what we saw in Detroit, where we have an Amon-Ra role and a Jameson role. That's not going to happen. We're going to see, I mean, if we had to choose, right, DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, are they more similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jameson Williams? They're more similar to Amon-Ra St. Brown. Of course, they're not as good, but they're more similar to Amon-Ra. I think we're going to see a lot of that from both of these guys. I mean, Rome Odunze can run every route. He had a perfect reception perception chart coming into the NFL. So it's not like he can't play everywhere. So I do think we're going to see more variety, more interchangeability with the new staff. And I'm pretty excited. But, with Rome Odunze, these types of elite players, prospects, if they don't start to show it about halfway through year 2, they're probably not going to see it. Jackson Smith-Njigba, you started to see it about 7-8 games into year 2. Usually, if you don't see it by then, it's probably over. So I'm keeping a very close eye on Rome Odunze through the first 8 to 10 games of 2025. Last question. How do you feel about Luther Burden as a prospect? Is he someone you like? Or does the year 3 production, or lack thereof, I might say, spook you a bit? I'm a bit nervous. I'm a bit nervous about Burden. The NFL seems to be souring on him on this entire wide receiver class. He did decline in 2024 production-wise. He did. And so much of his production was manufactured. Do I dislike Burden? No. Should Burden be a top 3 wide receiver in a normal wide receiver class? No. Last year, Burden, I think, in terms of draft capital, would have been competing for wide receiver 5, competing with Xavier Worthy for wide receiver 5, and clearly behind, the big 3 and BTJ from an NFL perspective. For me, I don't have a strong take on Burden. Other than that, Tet McMillan, my clear 1. Burden and Igbuka, they're 2 and 3. And everyone else is, you'd have to, if you're on a highway and, those players are there, Burden and Igbuka are here. And then, everyone else might be like 20 miles or, 17 exits. I don't know how many exits there are on a highway farther down. So to me, it's really 1, 2A and 2B, and then 6 in terms of the rest of the class. So I don't know how much that told you. I've been talking about the rookies in the Patreon for the last 2 months. I'll continue to do most of my rookie content in the Patreon until post NFL draft, where there will be YouTube content for rookies. So I hope you join the Patreon up there, patreon.com/fantasy advice, to catch all of that. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to support the channel by subscribing. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty rookie content, year-round, all of it. We're here 24 hours, 365 days a year. 50% discount at all tiers using code TylerYT. Every sign-up helps support my independent content, namely this YouTube channel. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.